everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Making a Difference in Mental Health. I'm Danielle.
I'm Wendy.
Today's episode, I'm so excited for. This is something new, Wendy. We've not done this in the 5 seasons that we've had the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're discussing mental health in faith-based communities.
Yeah, we've never touched on this topic. So
and
we're
if
excited.
And if you saw the reel, you know that we went on a road trip. And so Wendy was actually the presenter. We went up to Philly. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we want you to watch the footage, come back, and we'll have a reflection. And I'm actually going to interview Wendy and ask her a few questions about the presentation and the experience overall. Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you enjoyed the footage from our trip to Philadelphia. I'm actually going to toss it over to Wendy to just kind of summarize our trip, and then I'm going to ask her a few questions.
Okay, everybody. So I was invited, of course, to go to Germantown, which is a part of Philadelphia, and speak to parishioners at a local church around mental health and how do mental health and kind of religion mix and so forth and so on. So it was really, really humbling experience. It was fun to do. As Danielle said, we've never, ever touched upon the topic before. And so we were very excited to take our road trip. And of course, we make everything a podcast so we can share the information with our audience. So that was really the basis of why we went.
So I'm going to ask Wendy some questions. One, how did it feel for you to travel back to your hometown to present to some locals and maybe some others that you may know about mental health?
So always excited to go back to my hometown. Been quite a bit because my child goes to school in Philadelphia. Hey, Temple. Anyway, but this is a little different. This was some relatives that I grew up with and, really appreciate the work that we do around mental health. And she has a position in the church to always bring in guest speakers about a multitude of topics that interface with religion. So for me, I definitely did not want to turn this down. I love every opportunity that you and I can get, or I can get, or you can get to talk about the importance of mental health. So it was really a fun trip, and it's always great to go back to.
I also enjoyed the road trip, as in the ride up. And then it's almost like we do this on a regular basis. How would a faith-based community receive or even accept information about mental health? And whether I've said it before this season or in seasons past, I also grew up with a very strong and rich faith-based foundation where mental health wasn't necessarily the first line of self-care or support. It was prayer or, just kind of getting into a space where you're seeking a higher power, if you will, for support. But it wasn't until I would say maybe within the last decade or so that mental health began to be infused, or at least mental health information and psychoeducation began to be infused in faith-based communities that I am aware of. The other thing that was really interesting is that we were talking to a senior generation. How did that feel, Wendy, to present information where we normally present to
Younger
people,
crowds.
younger crowds? For a different generation? How'd that feel?
I think it was a little nerve-wracking, I'll admit, but keeping in mind, the respect of the generation and the knowledge and the wisdom that the generation has, and really getting into what you said, being able to fuse both things, the religious faith and also the importance of having professionals involved. And I think that was really well received. We had a gentleman who was in the audience who shared his story. And I thought it was powerful because A, he was a man. And B, his story spoke to the reason why you can infuse both things. So he was a man who had retired and in summary kind of lost his way and became kind of depressed because he didn't have work to do anymore. And his depression kind of spiraled.
Right.
And then he realized that, yes, he is a man of faith. He goes to church. He's active in his church, but it just wasn't cutting it. And so for him, he reached out and then got a therapist and ended up getting on medication as well. And he just spoke to everybody in the room like this was so important. Like I didn't want to sit back and just pray only. I wanted to take advantage of those who are trained that could help me. And today he said his life is just so much better. It's more rich. He's feeling good and he doesn't regret the decision. So I thought that was really powerful. And it speaks to, just generations that are, very, very rigid in their belief about it's just prayer. It's just go to church. It's just prayer. It's just You know what I mean? Like you're on that cycle.
Yeah.
And I really was appreciative that people could acknowledge that, we are mental health professionals. We are trained to handle trauma and all sorts of issues, and that people need to rely on us for that expertise.
Another thing I appreciated, not only was he a gentleman of a certain generation, he was a man of color.
Yes.
And he certainly spoke on everything that you just hit on. And I think even at the end, we again, after we stopped rolling, we just said, listen, this was really good. This was really impactful. Not only do we need to hear from men of color about mental health and yes, infusing faith into your mental health work, but of a certain generation.
Yes.
And I think he's over the age of 70. Looked pretty good.
Yeah, he did. So we're guessing we're reaching, but he looked really good.
But he looked really good. And then Wendy, I have another question for you too. Not only was it a generational thing, but what I noticed too, these were people from different cultures. At least I could detect accents.
Yes.
And so we had a few women who were able to speak. And I believe they were from either the Caribbean or the diaspora, so to speak. And they also had different takes on mental health. And it seemed like, maybe we go into not only mental health and religion, but kind of politics or,
that came
so let us know about, for those who are watching, the importance of, even in faith-based practices, you should know who your council members are. You should know about local government and resources. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, part of, the discussion, I think even before I started presenting, was just reminding everybody there to go vote.
Yeah.
Because this was right before the election that we took this road trip. So not saying you've got to vote for this person or that person, just exercising your privilege and right to vote. So that was a heavy duty discussion there. And then just, from a policy perspective, knowing your local government who's running is impactful because it impacts the services that can be rendered in the community in terms of mental health. So I think, that was powerful because, again, it was some education given to everyone. And again, it just speaks to, any kind of service that you would get in a community. You have to know who is in your local government, who's in your state government, who can, impact those policies and that work for you. So that's kind of what I got out of that experience.
I think it's very important, again, coming from a background where your faith is your foundation. It is still also important to know what rules, regulations, laws go into place, because that can actually impact your faith, or it can impact services that you may receive or not receive. So it's always good to be aware, in addition to all of your awarenesses of your faith books and, the ways in which that you allow yourself to move through life through your faith practices.
I just wanted to add too that, it's important for people who will need clinicians who have a faith-based approach to mental health that brings comfort to people because of their works in the church and their spirituality and religious beliefs. And so if they're going to see someone who has that perspective, that's comforting.
Yeah. And I think we also connected that too in this particular presentation where this was a Christian faith-based church. And so we were able to connect even some major characters in the Bible who also were challenged with some mental health challenges, but then there was also a remedy either within the Bible. And we can, fast forward to today, we can see what that looks like. Right. And so having a faith-based clinician, there are Christian counselors, there's different types of counselors that can address mental health challenges, emotional challenges, and then also related to, your religious text.
Yeah, just religious challenges too, and trying to understand, things that happen in the world to them and, around them. So.
All right, I have two more questions before we wrap this up. Yes, Wendy is in the hot seat today.
I've been enjoying this interview.
Good. Okay, so let's talk about the youth within the faith-based communities. Now, this was a senior group, but a lot of them also spoke about the youth. And they spoke about wanting resources for, children, grandchildren, or young adults, and them being aware of their accesses to mental health services as well. How did you feel about hearing the older generation talk about the younger generation and them needing to be educated about mental health?
Right. I was actually very excited. I think the conversation started around social media. Our favorite topic. We talk about social media all the time, and older generation trying to figure out how to control social media because they're now paying attention to the youth and they're now seeing, and I think I spoke about it, just the rates for teenage girls, suicide rates are so high on, social media. So they're paying attention. Thank God they're paying attention. And, we're looking for those resources, looking for those suggestions, trying to figure out, because social media, they know isn't going away. It is a part of everybody's lives, especially the younger generation. So how do you balance that? How do you manage that? And then, it led to the discussion of us being on the Prosper app. We talked about this app.
That's right.
Where kids can go on or teenagers can go on without parental consent. They're going on to look for resources. They're going on to join like chat rooms around mental health, and they can actually look for providers on their own. So ABH is a provider on this mental health app. And so I think that's the conversation that we had that day. And it just, it warmed my heart that, older generation, they're now paying attention. These kids are really struggling.
Yes, that was good. And if you are wondering what the Prosper app is, also check out our Duval High School Community Resource Day, where we go a little bit more into the Prosper app. And you can actually see ABH on the app there. Yeah. All right, Wendy. So one last question before we kind of wrap up.
Okay.
Because we have viewership, and this is our first time talking about mental health in faith-based spaces, what either advice or tips would you give someone who is interested in expanding, or maybe this is the first time they've seen these topics together? What tips would you give someone who's more leaning faith-based, but is ready to explore mental health services, psychoeducation, and options?
Okay. So, the first thing that I tell people is, again, there are faith-based counselors and therapists. And so if you're wondering, how to access those services, do your research, pull that up, talk to members in your church, because you never know. You have a lot of educated people in church, and you never know what the degrees they hold or the skills they have. And so it never hurts to, maybe start with the pastor. The pastor may know or have a connection. So that would be the biggest advice I say. And if you have a desire to get mental health services and you're not really focused on having someone who has a faith-based background, plenty of therapists out there to, meet the needs that are going on with you or your family, whether it's trauma, you know, ABH is trauma focused. So that's our skill base. But, you know, drugs, alcohol, substance abuse, domestic violence, any of those things,
all that,
you can find a therapist. But I would say, again, it's really good to start within your church community.
Excellent. I have actually interviewed Wendy.
Never before.
We're so used to interviewing others, but you know, it was just such a pleasure to ride along and be behind the scenes and see Wendy do her work in her hometown. And, you know, I was excited to get every single sign and, oh, this is Philly. And this
Welcome
is
to Philly.
Yes. And we had such a good time. But I would love to do more of this particular type of series.
Yeah.
You know, meshing together mental health and things that we've not talked about before. But this particular series this particular episode was a really good one. And I really enjoyed it. And really enjoyed seeing you do your thing too.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Appreciate you.
All right. So this is the end of the episode. Again, we are so happy for you to join us. We hope that you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'm Danielle.
I'm Wendy.
This is Making a Difference in Mental Health, where we're always striving to make a difference in mental health. We'll see you next time.
Bye.